This is the 5-minute guide to the HMS Captain, an ironclad failure of the Royal Navy.
Ladies, gentlemen, and interested aliens from Omicron Persei 8, take a look at this. This is a tank. More specifically, this is the Valiant tank. This tank was so bad that after a few minutes of testing, its existence was solely justified as an object lesson on how not to design a tank for future generations. Why is there a tank on a warships channel? Well, we're about to look at the seagoing equivalent of the Valiant tank, the HMS Captain. The Captain's origins actually go back further than the HMS Warrior, which we looked at last week. During and after the Crimean War of the 1850s, a certain Captain Coles of the Royal Navy developed and patented a rotating turret design for use in seagoing warships. At the same time as the Warrior was being commissioned, the Admiralty was installing turrets in a test ship to determine their value. Duly impressed, they ordered a coastal defence ship armed with turrets, and ordered the conversion of a first-rate wooden ship of the line to a turret-based coastal defence ship as well. However, the complex rigging and masts needed for sails badly impeded the turret's arc of fire, and since engine technology was not yet good enough to be the sole provider of power on long voyages, it was not possible at that point to construct an ocean-going turret ship, since the long-distance vessel would need sails. However, the development of tripod masts offered a solution that significantly reduced the amount of rigging needed, and so two projects were authorised with Captain Coles leading them, for a single turret ship and for a ship with two turrets. However, within a couple of years, an Admiralty Design Committee determined Coles' single turret ship would not offer a suitable arc of fire, and instead recommended a two-turret design with masts that would eventually become HMS Monarch. Apparently a little bit irritated that his preferred designs were not being selected, Coles went on a lobbying spree in public and in Parliament, and was successful to the point that in 1866 public and political pressure forced the Admiralty to allow him to build a two-turret ship to his own design. Coles chose the yard for the ship's construction, and in order to give the guns the widest field of fire, the turrets were mounted extremely low in the ship, with the mast mounted in a deck far above them that bridged the turrets, and left them in what appeared to be cutouts in the hull. The distance from the waterline to the deck on which the turret stood was designed to be only about 8 feet, and the Admiralty's actual engineers, experienced in shipbuilding, were extremely worried that this could cause flooding and instability. As a result, the First Lord of the Admiralty took the highly unusual step of authorising the construction, but noting that responsibility for failure would lie on Coles and the builders alone, since the Royal Navy wanted nothing to do with it. With the Navy unwilling to touch the project with a 10-foot pole, and Coles suffering a bout of serious illness, there was very little supervision during construction, and the ship was just over 700 tons heavier than planned, and the actual distance from the waterline to the deck ended up being just 6 feet 6 inches. The ship's centre of gravity also rose, making it more unstable since it would not have to list as far before capsizing. The Navy's constructors went absolutely ballistic over these issues, but their objections were overruled. The ship would commission at the end of April 1870 with a belt of armour between 4 and 8 inches thick, depending on where on the hull you were, and a pair of turrets each carrying a pair of short-barrel 12-inch guns, plus a pair of 7-inch guns mounted elsewhere on the ship. Initially, it seemed to perform well, or at least it was still afloat at the end of the trials. However, during her trials, a gunnery drill revealed that the ship rolled alarmingly whenever the guns were fired in broadside, which meant that of the 3 ships taking part, including her competitor the Monarch, the Captain was the slowest firing and least accurate ship present. But it would all come to a dramatic climax on the 6th of September 1870. The Captain was cruising as part of a fleet made up of the Mediterranean and Channel squadrons off Cape Finisterre. The fleet admiral had been aboard during the day and was disturbed to see that even in relatively mild conditions, waves were washing over the weather deck. The weather worsened with rain as the night progressed, and a number of sails were reduced. This rose to a gale as the night went on further, and just after midnight the ship was heeling over at 18 degrees when the crew felt it lurch to starboard twice. Orders were rapidly given to draw in or loose off all sails, but before this could be done the roll increased and she capsized and sank, taking about 480 men with her, including Captain Coles. 27 of the crew who happened to be above deck survived, mainly by grabbing onto a ship's boat which had come loose. The inquiry afterward concluded that the ship had never been safely stable. At a list of as little as 14 degrees, the force exerted by the ship's buoyancy to push it back upright was just 410 foot-tons, compared to her direct competitor, designed by the Navy, the HMS Monarch, which had been in the same storm, which exerted a force of 6,500 foot-tons at the same angle. Whereas most ships will increasingly resist capsize up to around 50 degrees of tilt, give or take about 10 degrees, on the Captain this point was reached at a mere 21 degrees, and by 54.5 degrees it would have capsized under its own weight anyway. Between these two factors, it would take relatively little force to push it over, and evidently the force of the gale pushing against the ship's masts and sails had been enough to roll the ship over, where every other ship in the fleet had barely been troubled. The inquiry concluded that the Captain was built in deference to public opinion expressed in Parliament and through other channels, and in opposition to views and opinions of the Controller and his department. Somewhat unsurprisingly, whilst the Royal Navy would remain susceptible to public and political pressure forcing it to build ships in later years, they would, from now on, always insist that any ship built would be one that they had designed and authorised, and not someone else without a clue of ship design thought was a good idea.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to start your query with Q&A if you want to submit a question to the dry dock.